They called her the beast in the sack, but the cowboy found his heart inside it. They called her the beast in the sack long before the cowboy ever laid eyes on her, a name whispered with fear across ranches and saloons because no one had seen a woman built with such raw strength yet carrying the silence of someone who had endured too much. For far too long, the stories claimed she could snap ropes like twigs, lift grown men by the collar, and outrun horses when hunting or defending her people. But none of those tales mentioned the part of her soul that had been carved by loneliness. When the ranchers captured her, after a violent misunderstanding with a neighboring herd, they stuffed her head under a rough burlap sack, tied her wrists, and dragged her to an abandoned corral, where they waited for someone brave or foolish enough to decide her fate. That someone turned out to be a quiet cowboy named Colt, known for mending fences, not breaking bones, a man who rarely raised his voice yet carried a gravity that made people listen when he finally spoke. He stepped into the corral, ignoring the jeers from the men watching him, and crouched in front of the bound woman whose knees pressed into the dust, her breath slow but steady, as if she refused to give these men the satisfaction of seeing fear. Colt gently lifted the sack, revealing a face marked by struggle yet carved with dignity, strong jawline, fierce eyes that softened. For only a split second when she saw he wasn't like the others. Her arms trembled from the tight ropes, but she held her posture, refusing to bow even as strands of her hair clung to her cheek. Colt could see she wasn't a beast, just a human being treated like one. He loosened the rope around her shoulders while the other men protested, but he ignored them, speaking softly to her, telling her he wasn't there to hurt her. She didn't answer at first, simply studying him as if weighing his soul more than his words. When she finally spoke, her voice was rough yet steady, telling him her name was Naya, and that she had been defending her younger brother when the ranchers intercepted her, misunderstanding her actions for aggression. Colt didn't call her a liar the way the others had. He saw truth in her eyes, the kind of truth that doesn't need defending. She flinched when he touched the knot at her wrists, not from fear but from the sting of rope burn, and he apologized under his breath even though she had heard rougher voices and colder hands all her life. The men behind the fence mocked them, calling him foolish for caring, but Colt kept his focus on her, promising that no one would harm her while he was there. A promise like that was dangerous, almost reckless, but something inside him shifted the moment she met. His gaze without hostility, more like she was asking if trust still existed in this world. When she finally whispered that she didn't want to fight anymore, that she was simply tired of being hunted, Colt felt something inside him crack open. She wasn't a monster. She was a woman who had carried burdens, too heavy for even her powerful frame. He untied her completely, ignoring the outrage from the ranchers, and helped her stand, her breath catching from the pain in her muscles. But even injured and exhausted, she appeared majestic, like a warrior forced to kneel but never truly broken. Colt guided her out of the corral, shielding her from the men who once boasted about capturing her, and though she stumbled from weakness, she never let her eyes fall from his, as if she wanted to memorize the face of the first man who treated her like a person. That day, Colt didn't just defend her, he began unraveling every lie the world had told about her, and deep inside, though neither of them would say it yet, a connection began forming that would change everything that followed. Colt brought Naya to the barn behind his small ranch house, not as a prisoner but as someone who needed rest, food, and space to breathe after too many days spent running from men who refused to understand her. She sat on a wooden stool as he cleaned the raw rope burns on her wrists, her massive hands steady despite the sting, her eyes following every gentle motion he made, as if she couldn't understand why this stranger cared. She confessed in pieces that she had spent years defending her tribe from ranchers who wanted their land, and each confrontation added another layer to the legend people twisted into fear. Colt listened without judgment, and with each sentence, the stories about her being savage faded, replaced by the reality of a woman who carried the weight of protecting those she loved. When he offered her food, she hesitated before accepting, as though kindness was a rare currency she didn't know how to spend. Days passed with her recovering in the barn, her strength returning, but something else grew too. Quiet conversations at dusk, small smiles she didn't know she could still give, glances that lingered a little longer each time. Colt found himself drawn to her resilience, the quiet humanity beneath her hardened exterior. while she found comfort in his steady presence, something softer than the world had ever offered her. One evening, when she was finally strong enough to walk without pain, she followed him to the corral where he spent his nights fixing tools and mending rails. She told him that the other ranchers still feared her and would never let her live in peace unless she disappeared again. But her voice shook in a way that revealed what she really feared, returning to a life of running, hiding, and fighting alone. Colt stepped closer, telling her she didn't have to go anywhere, that he would stand with her no matter what came. She searched his eyes with the intensity of someone afraid of believing too much, then asked why he risked everything for her. Colt didn't have a poetic answer. He simply told her the truth, that the moment he looked into her eyes beneath that sack, he saw a woman worth protecting, not because she was fragile, but because she had never been protected before. For the first time in years, Naya's breath caught not from pain, but from something she didn't recognize at first: hope. When the ranchers finally arrived, demanding he hand her over, Colt walked out alone, standing between them and the barn, refusing to let their hatred decide her fate. They called him crazy, claimed she would turn on him eventually, but he didn't flinch. Instead, he spoke loudly enough for Naya to hear inside the barn, telling them that calling her a beast didn't make it true, that fear had blinded them to the courage and heart she carried. The standoff grew tense until Naya stepped beside him, her towering figure casting a long shadow across the yard. But instead of attacking, she stood calmly, shoulders straight, eyes steady, showing them she wasn't the creature they imagined. Something in her presence, strength without violence, pride without threat, made the ranchers hesitate, unsure of their own stories. One by one, they lowered their rifles and backed away, not because they feared her power, but because they finally saw the truth Colt had seen from the beginning. When the dust settled and the ranchers left, Naya turned to him, realizing he had not just saved her life. He had given her a place where she didn't have to be a legend or a warning, just a woman capable of love. She placed her hand on his chest, not as a warrior, but as someone choosing to stay. And in that silent moment, she understood that the heart she had been denied for so long had finally found somewhere to rest. And Colt, looking up at the woman once feared across the west, realized that the Sac people mocked had hidden not a beast but the strongest, rarest soul he had ever known, and he would spend his life proving it to her.